Hello and welcome to another garden safari, and this is the morning after we've put the moth trap out and we've unboxed it and kept some of the moths to one side. We'll have a look at those in a minute. There are also moths all over the walls here which were illuminated by the moth trap overnight, and they're still here so we can have a look at them. So we'll have a look at the moth trap first, and that's what it looks like. So it's a big circular bin really, with a very bright light bulb that sits on top, which has a very high UV signature, so it pulls in moths from far and wide that navigate their way through the landscape using distant light sources. But if it's a close light source, they spiral in and end up in there. And this is full of egg boxes, and that's specifically so that we always use egg boxes in moth trapping. Moths can hide in underneath where it's dark and shady. Oh, one just escaped. And then we can keep them in there, have a look, identify them, and then let them go safely into cover or leave it till the evening. You can probably hear there are plenty of sparrows and starlings hanging about wanting a bit of breakfast. So that's where they end up, but they also end up on the walls nearby, and we'll have a look at some of them here. So here we've got this beautifully and intricately patterned willow beauty. Holds its wings out when it's at rest. Called a willow beauty because its caterpillars feed on willow and lots of other things too, but covered in these really beautiful markings. Just above it, a moth that holds its wings together at rest is a pale tussock, and that's a female. Bigger, paler. Don't get so many of those at moth traps. You get lots of males, and we'll have a look at a male in a sec. But it has these long furry front legs that stick out in front, so it's quite a comical looking thing, very distinctive, and it has an incredibly distinctive bright yellow caterpillar. So that's a pale tussock. There's a male in brilliant sunshine, so you may not be able to see it all that clearly. Down there you can certainly see his furry front legs and fantastically intricate antennae. Up here we've got a really tiny one, and this is a pug. Pugs are a difficult group. I think that's probably a grey pug, which is one of the very common ones, but they're pretty tricky to identify, and they are very distinctive the way they hold their wings out and expose the abdomen like that. They're all really tiny things, but often many species of these living in urban gardens. And up here, if we can try and get focused in on it, it's right in the full sun. There it is. Okay, now that is actually rather an interesting moth, because that is a Cypress Carpet, and a Cypress Carpet wasn't recorded in the UK at all until 1984, and it's colonised the whole of the south coast and it's spreading north, probably driven partly by climate change. Moths adapt very quickly to changing patterns of seasonality and climate, and so these arrivals can stick and then colonise permanently. Its caterpillars feed on cypresses, and there are plenty of those in the urban landscape, leylandii and so on. But it's quite a pretty moth with this sort of dark, jagged line down each of its wings. Okay, so we're going to have a wander over here. On our way, we'll have a look at one of my absolute favourites, which is this stunning little moth called angleshades. And you can see it's got this great dead leaf camouflage with a raggedy edge and these fantastic pink triangles, so patterned entirely to give that kind of mottled look that you would get in dead and dying leaves, dead and dying wood. So it's wonderfully camouflaged, but it's a really stunning little insect, very common, so it's almost certainly in your garden or park. Beautiful thing. So over here, what else have we got on the wall? We have got another willow beauty, and just next to it we've got another intricately marked moth, and this is a Poplar Gray with that little white circular spot in the middle of each of its wings, and its black and white stripy leg warmers. Called Poplar Gray again because its caterpillars feed on poplars and willows and all sorts of other plants. Many of these moths are named after their caterpillar food plants. Adult moths either don't feed at all, many of them, or they of course feed on nectar from flowers, but most of the feeding, certainly all the protein really, is done as a caterpillar, which is why it's really important to have the right kind of food plants in your garden to support the larval stages if you want these beautiful adults. There's another fantastic pale tussock, that's a male. Those very distinctive front legs. Okay, and we'll have a look in the box now at some of the other things that we caught. So here we've got two Very nice little moss. Let's try and get out of the sun. Okay, so the one on the left there is called a heart and dart. Kind of superficially, I suppose, the dark lines at the top look a bit like a dart, and the shape at the bottom is vaguely heart-shaped. It's a really common moth, loads of them in the moth traps. And this one over here, as with many moths, is named exactly the way you would expect. This is called a Treble Lines. And it has, sure enough, 3 lines crossing both wings. There are so many moth species, many, many more than butterflies, that the English names are often very precise to give you at least some kind of indication of what you might be looking at. So that's a really beautiful moth called Treble Lines. And it's not just moths that we end up seeing in the moth trap. It's also, and I'm going to have to turn this to one side for you to see this, it's also beetles. And that's a cockchafer or a maybug. These great big blundering beetles that find their way into moth traps. They're attracted to the light, and we find them all through May and June. These have big grubs that eat the roots of the plants in your lawn, and you'll often find them digging about in the garden. But the adults are these great big things, really good bat food, big chunky slow-flying beetles. So we do get other things, nocturnal visitors to moth traps, all sorts of things, including these beetles. So there we are, that's a quick tour of the moth trap. A final look at the big light bulb. It's a mighty thing, and the box itself. And we'll run that again and report back on other things we may find. But that's it for now. Okay.